Imagine a battlefield where thousands of soldiers clash under the scorching sun. War chariots cut across the terrain, bronze spears glisten in the air, and the fate of entire empires hangs in the balance. This is warfare in the Bronze Age, an era where metallurgy forever changed the art of destruction. The thunderous sound of hooves tears through the silence as formations of chariots approach one another at devastating speed. Elite warriors, adorned in bronze armor that catches the sunlight, prepare to unleash volleys of arrows. Behind them, infantry soldiers grip their bronze-tipped spears with white knuckles, knowing they stand at the crossroads of history. The ground trembles, not just from the weight of thousands of men and beasts, but from the weight of the moment itself, when kingdoms rise or fall based on the strategies of their commanders and the courage of their warriors. Between 3300 and 1200 before Christ, the emergence of bronze revolutionized not only weapons production, but also strategies of war. The discovery that mixing copper with tin created a metal stronger than either component alone gave birth to a military revolution that would define an era. This wasn't merely a technological advancement, it was the catalyst for the first great civilizations and their expansions. Empires like Egypt, with its godlike pharaohs commanding vast armies from their ornate war chariots. The Hittites, masters of ironworking who built a formidable kingdom in what is now Turkey. And the Mycenaeans, whose legendary warriors would later inspire tales of the Trojan War, all waged epic battles that shaped the ancient world. Great cities arose, protected by massive walls that seemed impenetrable. Trade routes stretched across continents, carrying not just precious goods, but also military innovations. This was the age when warfare became organized, strategic, and central to the identity of emerging states. But how exactly did bronze technology transform warfare? Who were the masterminds of battle during this time? What tactics allowed some empires to conquer vast territories while others crumbled? The answers reveal a world far more sophisticated, brutal, and complex than most imagine. If you love history and want to uncover the secrets of the great empires, like this video, subscribe to the Dawn of Humankind channel and don't miss a single episode. Join us as we journey back thousands of years to witness the clashes that forged our civilization and learn the untold stories of the first professional warriors in human history. Before the discovery of bronze, ancient warriors faced a deadly problem. Their weapons were simply inadequate. Stone clubs shattered upon impact. Obsidian blades, while razor-sharp, broke after just a few strikes, and early copper weapons. They bent and dulled almost immediately in the heat of battle. Imagine being a soldier in 4000 before Christ, charging into battle with a weapon you knew might fail you at any moment. The fear wasn't just of your enemy, it was of your own equipment betraying you when you needed it most. But then came one of history's most transformative discoveries. Someone, we'll never know who, realized that mixing copper with tin created something extraordinary: bronze. This wasn't just another metal, it was a revolution cast in fire and sweat. Bronze changed everything about warfare. Suddenly, smiths could forge swords nearly 3 feet long that maintained their edge through an entire battle. Spears could be thrust repeatedly into enemy lines without bending. Axes could cleave through wooden shields with terrifying efficiency. And for the first time in human history, body armor became truly effective, bronze plates and scales offering protection that leather and wood never could. What's fascinating is how this technology spread and evolved. In Egypt, bronze daggers evolved from simple stabbing tools to elegant curved weapons designed specifically for slicing through the gaps in enemy armor. In Mesopotamia, the armies of Sargon the Great used standardized bronze spearheads to equip the world's first professional standing army around 2300 before Christ. The Mycenaeans, those warriors we often associate with the legends of Troy, developed a particularly fearsome weapon, the Naue-2 sword. Longer and more balanced than previous designs, it could both slash and thrust effectively. Archaeologists have found these swords across Europe, showing how superior weapon designs spread even between rival cultures. One discovery in the tomb of a warrior from Crete reveals the deadly efficiency these new weapons brought. Analysis of his bronze sword shows it could deliver a blow with force comparable to a modern axe. Against opponents with primitive weapons, this was nothing short of overwhelming. But perhaps most importantly, bronze weapons created a new social order. Suddenly, those who controlled tin and copper mines held tremendous power, trade routes became vital strategic assets, and a new warrior elite emerged, professional soldiers equipped with expensive bronze weapons and specialized training. Think about what this meant for the average person. Before bronze, a farmer with a stone axe could reasonably defend himself against most threats. After bronze, that same farmer faced armored warriors with superior weapons. Military power became concentrated, laying the groundwork for the first true empires. The evidence of bronze's impact is written in the ruins of conquered cities, in mass graves of the defeated, and in the triumphal monuments of kings who wielded this new technology to reshape the ancient world. For the first time in human history, technological advantage translated directly into military dominance, a pattern that continues to this very day. No weapon symbolizes the Bronze Age more perfectly than the war chariot. Imagine the ground trembling beneath your feet as hundreds of these vehicles charge across the battlefield, kicking up clouds of dust that blot out the sun. The thundering of hooves, the creaking of wooden wheels, the battle cries of elite warriors. This was psychological warfare at its earliest and most effective. War chariots were the ancient world's first true game changers on the battlefield, the tanks of their day. Light enough to move swiftly, yet sturdy enough to carry 2 or 3 warriors, these revolutionary vehicles transformed warfare from slow, grinding infantry clashes into dynamic, fast-paced engagements where speed and maneuverability determined victory. But chariots didn't appear overnight. Their development represents one of humanity's most impressive feats of military engineering. First, our ancestors had to domesticate horses, no small achievement. Then they needed to design a vehicle light enough for these early horses to pull, yet strong enough to withstand the punishment of rough terrain. The wheels alone were masterpieces of Bronze Age craftsmanship, bent wood, reinforced with bronze, designed to survive high-speed turns without collapsing. These weren't just transportation, they were weapons platforms. A typical chariot carried a driver and an archer working in perfect coordination. While the driver maneuvered through enemy formations at breakneck speeds, the archer could loose arrow after arrow into tightly packed infantry. Some Egyptian chariots featured quivers that could hold up to 100 arrows, allowing sustained fire throughout a battle. The social impact of chariots was just as revolutionary as their military use. These weren't weapons for common soldiers. Chariot warriors formed an elite class, the earliest knight equivalents in history. In many Bronze Age societies, they represented nobility and were depicted in art as larger than life. Training began in childhood, creating warriors who could balance in a bouncing chariot while accurately firing arrows, a skill as impressive then as any modern Olympic feat. Perhaps the most famous chariot battle in history took place at Kadesh in 1274 before Christ. The young pharaoh Ramses II, barely in his 20s, led the Egyptian army north to confront the Hittite Empire. What happened next became the stuff of legend. Lured into a trap, Ramses found himself cut off from the main Egyptian army, surrounded by 2,500 Hittite chariots. In what must rank as one of history's most dramatic moments, Ramses personally led a desperate chariot charge to break through the Hittite lines. Contemporary accounts claim he fought like Baal in his hour, a god of war incarnate. Whether through extraordinary courage or extraordinary luck, he managed to hold out until reinforcements arrived, turning potential disaster into a hard-fought draw. The battle was so significant that it led to the world's first recorded peace treaty, a copy of which still hangs in the United Nations headquarters today, a reminder of both ancient warfare and ancient diplomacy. But chariots had weaknesses too. They required flat, open ground to be effective. They were expensive to build and maintain, and they demanded constant care for the horses that pulled them. Some clever generals exploited these weaknesses. The Canaanites, for instance, dug hidden pits in their battlefields to trap charging Egyptian chariots. By the end of the Bronze Age, these magnificent vehicles had become the centerpiece of military power for empires spanning from China to Egypt, from the Hittites to the Mycenaeans. They represented not just military might, but the height of Bronze Age technological achievement. A perfect marriage of metallurgy, woodworking, animal husbandry, and tactical innovation that would dominate battlefields for nearly 1,000 years. Picture this. The year is 1274 before Christ. Two superpowers of the ancient world are about to collide in what would become history's first fully documented battle. On one side, the Egyptian Empire led by a young, ambitious pharaoh, Ramses II. On the other, the mighty Hittite Empire under King Muwatalli II, determined to check Egyptian expansion. At stake, control of crucial trade routes and the fertile lands of what is now Syria. This wasn't just any battle, it was truly a clash of titans. Between them, these empires fielded approximately 5,000 war chariots, tens of thousands of infantry and military technologies that represented the pinnacle of Bronze Age warfare. The sheer scale was unprecedented. The ancient texts tell us that the Hittite force was so massive that they covered the mountains and valleys like locusts. What makes Kadesh truly remarkable is that we know so much about it. This conflict left behind the most detailed battle records of the ancient world. Inscriptions on temple walls, papyrus documents, diplomatic correspondence, and even peace treaties. In many ways, Kadesh represents humanity's first step toward documented military history. The battle itself began with a brilliant deception. Hittite spies fed false information to Egyptian scouts, claiming their main army was still far away near Aleppo. Taking the bait, Ramses split his forces and rushed ahead with just one division, eager to capture the fortress of Kadesh. Little did he know that the entire Hittite army was hiding just beyond a nearby ridge. What followed was nearly a catastrophe for Egypt. 2,500 Hittite chariots suddenly swept across the Orontes River, smashing into the unprepared Egyptian forces. Ramses's division was scattered, his camp overrun. By all accounts, the pharaoh found himself surrounded, cut off from the rest of his army. Ancient texts describe the moment dramatically. His Majesty was alone, none other with him. In this desperate moment, according to Egyptian accounts, Ramses personally led a counterattack, fighting with such ferocity that he single-handedly turned the tide of battle. The inscriptions claim he charged the enemy lines 6 times, each time cutting a path through the Hittite forces like the war god Montu himself. But here's where the story gets fascinating. We have both sides of this ancient story. While Egyptian temples show Ramses achieving a glorious victory, Hittite records tell a completely different tale. According to their version, Ramses barely escaped with his life and had to be rescued when Egyptian reinforcements finally arrived. The Hittite account describes Ramses as defeated and humiliated. So who's telling the truth? Modern historians believe the reality lies somewhere in between. Ramses likely did fight bravely to avoid complete disaster, but the battle probably ended in a strategic draw. The Egyptians failed to capture Kadesh, while the Hittites failed to destroy the Egyptian army. What's most remarkable about Kadesh isn't just the battle itself, but what came after. 16 years later, these same enemies signed what historians consider the world's first comprehensive peace treaty. This agreement, recorded on silver tablets in both Egyptian hieroglyphics and Hittite cuneiform, established boundaries, formalized diplomatic relations, and even included an extradition clause for political refugees. A copy of this treaty still hangs in the United Nations headquarters today, a 3,000-year-old reminder that even the bitterest enemies can eventually find peace. But perhaps the most enduring legacy of Kadesh is Ramses' masterful propaganda campaign. Returning to Egypt without having captured his objective, the young pharaoh faced a potential political crisis. His solution? He commissioned massive temple carvings depicting himself as a lone hero who snatched victory from the jaws of defeat. These images appear on temples from Abu Simbel to Luxor, Abydos to the Ramesseum, a Bronze Age public relations campaign carved in stone. These magnificent carvings still stand today, telling Ramses' version of events long after more accurate accounts were forgotten. It's a powerful reminder that controlling the narrative of war has always been as important as the fighting itself. Ramses may not have won at Kadesh, but he certainly won the battle for historical memory, at least until modern archaeologists began comparing Egyptian accounts with Hittite records. Did you know that Ramses II lied about his victory at Kadesh? If you're enjoying this video, hit that like button, share it with your history-loving friends, and subscribe to the Dawn of Humankind channel. And tell us in the comments, which Bronze Age empire do you find most fascinating? Was it the mighty Egyptians with their monumental architecture, the innovative Hittites who pioneered ironworking, or perhaps the mysterious Mycenaeans whose legends inspired Homer? Let us know below. As Bronze Age civilizations grew wealthy from trade and conquest, they faced a serious problem: how to protect their riches from envious neighbors. Their solution? Massive walls, some of the most impressive structures ever built by ancient hands. These weren't just barriers, they were statements of power carved in stone. Take the legendary city of Troy, for instance. Archaeological excavations have revealed not just one wall, but layer upon layer of fortifications built over centuries. At their height, Troy's walls stood over 20 feet tall and 15 feet thick, a formidable obstacle to any attacking army. What's particularly ingenious about Troy's defenses was their slight inward slope, making them resistant to battering rams and nearly impossible to scale with ladders. Or consider Mycenae in Greece, with its famous Lion Gate and walls so massive that later Greeks believed they must have been built by the Cyclops, one-eyed giants from mythology. These walls contained stones weighing as much as 6 tons each, precisely fitted together without mortar. Even today, you can't slip a knife blade between many of these stone blocks. Standing at the base of these walls, an attacking soldier would have felt utterly dwarfed by their immensity. But humans are remarkably creative, especially when it comes to breaking things. For every defensive innovation, Bronze Age generals developed new offensive techniques. The science of siege warfare was born. The simplest approach was the siege itself: surround the city, cut off all supplies, and wait for hunger and thirst to do what weapons couldn't. But few armies had the patience or resources for prolonged campaigns. They needed to get inside those walls quickly. This led to fascinating innovations. Archaeological evidence shows that Bronze Age armies built massive earth ramps to reach the top of enemy walls. At the ancient city of Lachish, attackers constructed a ramp nearly 200 feet long and 60 feet high, an enormous engineering project requiring thousands of laborers. Once completed, this ramp allowed soldiers to approach the walls at a gentle incline rather than scaling vertical stone. Then there were battering rams, logs capped with bronze or iron, swung repeatedly against gates or weak points in walls. The most sophisticated versions were covered structures on wheels, protecting the soldiers operating the ram from arrows and spears raining down from above. Incredibly, some of these siege engines required teams of up to 50 men to operate effectively. Perhaps most ingenious were the tunnels. Bronze Age engineers would dig beneath enemy walls to either infiltrate the city secretly or, more dramatically, to undermine the foundations. They would prop up the tunnel with wooden supports, pack the space with combustible materials like pitch-soaked wood, and then set it ablaze. As the supports burned away, sections of the seemingly impregnable walls would dramatically collapse. These techniques weren't theoretical, they were used in actual sieges. Clay tablets from Mesopotamia describe tunneling operations conducted against walled cities as early as 2200 before Christ. One fascinating account details how defenders would place bronze bowls of water on the ground inside their walls. If the water's surface began to ripple, they knew enemy sappers were tunneling beneath them. And sometimes, victory came through trickery rather than brute force. The legendary Trojan horse represents this military strategy perfectly. While most historians doubt a wooden horse was actually used to capture Troy, the legend almost certainly grew from real military deceptions practiced in the Bronze Age. Perhaps it was based on a siege engine resembling a horse, or maybe it symbolized ships that snuck soldiers into the harbor under cover of darkness. Archaeological evidence suggests Troy did indeed fall to attackers around 1200 before Christ, with clear signs of destruction, fire, and violent death. Whatever method was used, the results were catastrophic for the defenders. The city that had withstood attacks for centuries finally fell. What's particularly fascinating about siege warfare in the Bronze Age is how it sparked a perpetual arms race between defensive and offensive technologies. As walls grew higher and thicker, siege engines became more sophisticated. As gates were reinforced, tunneling techniques improved. This technological competition drove innovation across the ancient world, and the legacy of these innovations. Many of the siege techniques developed in the Bronze Age remained essentially unchanged for thousands of years. When Alexander the Great besieged Tyre in 332 before Christ, or when the Romans attacked Masada 400 years later, they used methods that would have been recognizable to Bronze Age warriors. A testament to how thoroughly the fundamentals of siege warfare were established during this formative period of human military history. Around 1200 before Christ, something catastrophic happened, something so devastating that it would forever alter the course of human history. In just a single generation, mighty civilizations that had stood for centuries simply vanished. Imagine this: thriving cities reduced to ash and rubble, royal palaces ransacked and burned to the ground, international trade networks that had connected distant lands for centuries suddenly severed, writing systems forgotten, technologies lost. It was as if someone had switched off the lights of civilization across the entire Eastern Mediterranean. The scale of destruction is almost impossible to comprehend. Of the major urban centers across Greece, Anatolia, Cyprus, Syria, Canaan, and Egypt, an estimated 40 to 60 were violently destroyed. Mycenae, the legendary home of Agamemnon, burned and abandoned. Hattusa, the magnificent capital of the Hittite Empire, utterly destroyed, never to be rebuilt. The wealthy trading city of Ugarit, so thoroughly devastated that even its name was forgotten until archaeologists rediscovered it in the 20th century. What makes this collapse truly extraordinary is its speed. These weren't gradual declines, they were sudden catastrophic ends. Clay tablets found in the ruins of Ugarit reveal the desperation of its final days. One letter from the king reads, "The enemy ships are already here. They have set fire to my cities and have done very great damage in the country." This wasn't written decades before the city's fall. This was literally the king's final communication before Ugarit was overrun and destroyed. But who were these mysterious attackers that brought mighty empires to their knees? Egyptian records speak of the Sea Peoples, a coalition of mysterious groups with names like the Sherdan, Shekelesh, Luka, and Peliset. The pharaoh Ramses III describes them in vivid, terrifying terms. They came from the islands in the midst of the sea, moving together across land and sea. No one could stand before them. Indeed, relief carvings from Ramses' mortuary temple at Medinet Habu show these sea peoples in extraordinary detail. Distinctive feathered headdresses, unique weapons, even their ships with bird-headed prows. Unlike earlier enemies who sought tribute or conquest, these invaders seemed interested primarily in destruction. They didn't just defeat armies, they erased entire civilizations. Remarkably, Egypt alone survived these onslaughts relatively intact, though even the mighty pharaohs were badly weakened. In a massive naval battle in the Nile Delta, Ramses III managed to defeat the Sea People's fleet, a victory that likely saved Egyptian civilization. His inscriptions boast, "Those who reach my boundary, their seed is not. Their heart and their soul are finished forever and ever." But war may have been only one piece of this complex puzzle. Modern archaeology suggests a perfect storm of calamities struck the Bronze Age world simultaneously. Tree ring samples from this period reveal severe drought conditions lasting decades, perhaps the worst climate event of the last 10,000 years. Pollen analysis shows massive crop failures. With no food surplus, complex palace economies couldn't sustain their specialists, the scribes, officials, and craftsmen who formed the backbone of Bronze Age society. There's also compelling evidence for earthquakes devastating major urban centers. In Greece and Turkey, archaeologists have found buildings with walls that collapsed outward, a telltale sign of seismic destruction. One theory suggests that a sequence of major earthquakes along fault lines created a domino effect of destruction, infrastructure collapse, and social upheaval. Internal rebellions likely played a role too. Bronze Age palaces were centers of extreme wealth inequality. Royal treasuries overflowed with gold and luxury goods, while common people struggled under heavy taxation. When the system began to falter, whether from climate change, invasions, or natural disasters, the oppressed may have seized the opportunity to overthrow their rulers. Some of the burned palaces show signs that statues and symbols of royal power were deliberately targeted and desecrated. When the smoke finally cleared, the world had fundamentally changed. The interconnected cosmopolitan Bronze Age civilizations were replaced by isolated villages struggling for survival. International trade collapsed. Writing disappeared from Greece for over 400 years. Knowledge of sophisticated technologies was lost. Bronze itself, dependent on complex trade networks to source tin and copper, was gradually replaced by locally available iron. This wasn't just a political collapse, it was a systems collapse. The intricate web of economic, political, and social relationships that had sustained Bronze Age civilizations had unraveled completely. It would take centuries for new empires to rise from these ashes. Perhaps the most haunting aspect of the Bronze Age collapse is how it reveals the fragility of even the most seemingly permanent civilizations. For the people living through it, the fall of these ancient empires must have seemed like the end of the world itself. And in many ways it was. Their world, with its palaces and gods and certainties, was gone forever. In its place emerged something new. The early Iron Age societies that would eventually give birth to classical Greece, Phoenicia, Israel, and ultimately much of our modern world. From this catastrophic collapse came transformation and eventually rebirth, a pattern that echoes throughout human history, reminding us that even the darkest periods can lead to new beginnings. The Bronze Age stands as one of humanity's most transformative periods, a time when the discovery of a single alloy reshaped the face of warfare and, by extension, the course of civilization itself. For nearly 2,000 years, from the gleaming spires of Egypt to the fortified citadels of Mycenae, bronze weapons and the tactics they enabled determined which empires would rise and which would crumble to dust. When we look back at these ancient conflicts, The chariots thundering across the plains of Kadesh, the massive siege ramps built against the walls of Troy, the desperate naval battles against the mysterious sea peoples. We're not just witnessing distant historical curiosities. We're seeing the birth of organized warfare as we understand it today. The innovations of Bronze Age warriors echo through the millennia. The professional standing armies pioneered by Sargon of Akkad. The combined arms tactics of Thutmose III, the diplomatic treaties signed after the Battle of Kadesh, even the propaganda campaigns of Ramses II, all these developments established patterns that would be followed by generals and rulers for thousands of years to come. Perhaps what's most striking about Bronze Age warfare is how familiar it feels, despite the vast gulf of time separating us. These ancient warriors understood concepts we still grapple with today: the importance of technological advantage, the value of mobility on the battlefield, the psychological impact of fear, and the power of alliance systems. They knew that wars were won not just by courage, but by logistics, planning, and sometimes simple deception. Yet for all their military genius, the Bronze Age civilizations couldn't prevent their own spectacular collapse. When faced with a perfect storm of climate change, invasions, and internal unrest, even their mighty walls and bronze weapons proved insufficient. The very interconnected nature of their world, the trade networks that supplied tin and copper for bronze production, became a vulnerability when those networks unraveled. This raises profound questions for us today. Have we truly learned from the past? Our weapons have changed dramatically, of course, from bronze to iron to steel to nuclear arsenals. But has the fundamental nature of conflict evolved? Do we still fight for the same reasons: resources, power, territory, and pride? Are our own complex, interconnected systems just as vulnerable to cascading failures as those of the Bronze Age? The magnificent walls of Mycenae, the chariot squadrons of Egypt, the vast palace complexes of the Hittites, all seemed permanent and invincible to those who built them. Yet archaeology reveals them as fragile, their mighty stones toppled, their once bustling streets silent. Perhaps there's wisdom to be found in their rise and fall, lessons about both human ingenuity and human folly that remain as relevant today as they were 3,000 years ago. As we close our exploration of Bronze Age warfare, we're left with both admiration for what these ancient peoples achieved and sobering reflection on how quickly even the mightiest civilizations can fall. The bronze weapons that once gleamed in the Mediterranean sun now rest in museum cases, silent witnesses to humanity's enduring capacity for both creation and destruction. If you enjoyed this journey back to the battlefields of the Bronze Age, please hit that like button, share this video with your history-loving friends, and subscribe to the Dawn of Humankind channel for more content about humanity's fascinating past. From the first cities of Mesopotamia to the mysteries of ancient Egypt, from the warriors of the steppe to the sailors of the Mediterranean, our past is filled with stories waiting to be told. Join us next time as we continue our exploration of the civilizations that shaped our world. Until our next video, remember that understanding history isn't just about learning dates and facts. It's about connecting with the human experience across the ages.